All right, so in this video, I want to talk about converting fractions to decimals. There's also a video about converting decimals to fractions. And so there's definitely some similarities. I would encourage watching both of them or thinking about both of them. We want to start off, again, place value is an important thing to think about. I said that in the last video as well. But place value meaning if I had, for instance, number 0.123, your math teacher wants you to call that 123 thousandths. It's important to think about the place value of each of those numbers. Okay, so the 1, again, you could consider that is the tenths place. The 2 would be in the hundredths place, hundredths, and then the 3 would be in the thousandths place. Now, you could also keep going 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, and so on, but for most of the decimal and fraction work, this is probably going to be sufficient. So remembering those are tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So you have two main options for converting fractions to decimals. Option 1 is to make an equivalent fraction that has 10 or 100 or 1,000 as your denominator. So what I mean by that is, let's say you had the fraction 1/10. So if I had 1/10 and I had to turn that into a decimal, if I can read that as 1/10 and I know my place value, I know that the first digit is tenths. So this would be the same as 0.1, okay, or 1/10. If I had something like 3/5, now this is similar, but there's no fifths here. There's tenths, hundredths, thousandths. However, if I can make an equivalent fraction, again, that's an equal fraction that has tenths, hundredths, or thousandths in the denominator, then I can just write it in the correct spot. So I could multiply these by 2. Remember, if you multiply the denominator, you also have to multiply the numerator. And that would equal 6/10. And now I can just put 6/10 equals, you can say that's 0.6 or 6/10. Okay? If you had a larger one, like let's say you had 4 hundredths, again, hundredths would simply do 0.04. You'd want to make sure you keep that gap because 2 digits over is how far you have to go for hundredths. Last example, let's say if you had something like 3/25, and you want to make a denominator as 100 or 10. In this case, you could turn that into 100 by multiplying by 4. So we're making our equivalent fraction of 12 100ths, and then we can turn that into 0.12, which is 12 100ths. So that's your first option. Now, however, sometimes what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to do that. Let's say you had, for example, the fraction 1/8. You can't easily turn 8 into 10 or 100. Now, if you know your multiplication, you probably could turn it to 1,000, but most of us probably don't know that off the top of our head, and it doesn't seem like an easy thing. So my recommendation, and really what you got to do if you can't easily make it, is you want to divide the numerator by the denominator. Again, divide the top number by the bottom number. So in this case, I'm just dividing 1 by 8. This is a little bit of decimal division because 8 can't go into 1. So we put a decimal point and we put a 0. You can always add zeros, bring that 0 down. 8 goes into that 1 time, minus 8. This is 2, add another 0, bring that down. That's 2 times, minus 16 gives us a 4, another 0. Bring that down, and it goes in perfectly there. So we are done with our problem. Now, sometimes you will end up with the decimal division that keeps going and going and going. But in this case, we did end. Our decimal point goes straight up to the top. So 0.125, or 125 thousandths. Oops, sorry, 125. All right, sorry about that. So we've got a fraction turned to a decimal by simply dividing the numerator by the denominator. Another common thing that might happen, I'm going to put one right over here, is let's say you had something like 2/9. So I'm going to take the numerator, divide it by the denominator. So I'll put the 2 inside, divide by 9, can't go in. Add a decimal point, bring down a 0. It goes in 2 times, minus 18 gives me a 2. Bring down another 0. 2 times minus 18 equals 2. And you're going to see that there's a pattern, and that pattern is going to keep going on and on and on, meaning you're going to get 0.2222. It's going to keep going on forever. So what you can do in that situation is look at what is repeating. Now, it's just a 2 that's repeating. So I can then turn this into 0. 0.2 or 0 and 2/10, but I'm going to put this line on top, which means repeating decimal. So that would be 0.22222. So again, I just divided the numerator by the denominator. And that's basically all you need to do. Now, if you had let's say you had a improper fraction, I'm running a little bit out of space here, but if I had an improper fraction, such as 16/3, then I would look at that improper fraction. I would turn it into a mixed number, 16 divided by 3, so it goes in 5 times, and 1/3 left. So this is just turning an improper fraction to a mixed number. And then I would do 1 divided by 3. I'm going to do that over here where I have some space. Put another line, 1 divided by 3. It does not go in. Add another 0, goes in 3 times, minus 9 is 1. And we see that this pattern is going to continue. It's going to be 0.33333. So that means our improper fraction would just turn into 5 and 3, which is repeating. So 5 and 1/3 turns into that. Again, we just figure that by dividing the numerator by the denominator. So if you're lucky, you can make it a 10, the denominator 10, 100, or 1,000, and then write it out. If you can't do that, then you got to go division route.